Since the official declaration that the economy was in recession in December 2008 by the National Bureau of Economic Research, the U.S. economy has so far lost more than 8 million jobs. And even though there are all the signs that the worst is over and the economy is on the path of recovery following stimulus interventions by the Obama administration, it's evident that most of those jobs are gone forever and will not come back. One category of groups that was adversely impacted by the downturn is the immigrant population. Immigrants in the US, among the many Kenyans, have been the first ones to be affected as companies lay off workers or downsize.
It have affected Kenyans because most of the Kenyans who are here too have their careers are young. So they are the first, maybe when companies are downsizing, they are the first to be laid off.
Since the recession began, many Kenyans living and working in the US have seen their fortunes recede and dreams of prosperity deferred as doors of opportunity close in their faces. Those who have been laid off from their work are finding it extremely hard to find other jobs, while those who could manage to raise airfares back home have already left. Most are still struggling to make ends meet.
One thing I have to say is 90% of Kenyans who are in diaspora are professionals. That means that they work jobs that they require, they are high-skilled jobs. And from what is going on, especially the Kenyans who are working in the financial services industry, and Kenyans who are graduating, maybe have been graduated in the last couple of years, they are not getting jobs, and a lot of Kenyans are getting laid off. I have a lot of friends who have been laid off over the last several months, and that's hurting a lot of Kenyans here.
The worst affected are those who had bought big houses during the economic boom of the last decade with a view of investing in real estate. Buying a house was a common trend among Africans, especially Kenyans, whose only way of getting out of the American rat race was to build equity in their homes.
I'm sure you've heard, the idea of owning a house or a home is part of your financial well-being. Just as you invest, whether it's in stocks or whatever, buying a house is also part of that investment. And, realistically speaking, when you own a house, you do kind of gain self-confidence in yourself and in your finances. And so for Kenyans or immigrants, actually owning a home is a statement in itself. It's like you've arrived in a sense.
Many of them have lost their homes because they are not in a position to settle accrued mortgage payments.
I would probably say, I guess the ratios or the percentages would be, on the same level as nationwide. Let's say whether 50% probably. And if they're not foreclosed on, they have financial issues. Their mortgage, first of all, their homes are upside down, which means they owe more than the house is worth. And that's not just for Kenyans, it's across the board. What happens with foreigners, I think, is maybe we are not as open or as willing to talk about our concerns, our problems.
Thank you so much, Monakiri, and welcome again to Ambassador Ogego. So my name is Amandla. I'm a fourth-year student here at Yale, majoring in economics and international studies. And I was born in Nairobi, lived in Nairobi most of my life, except when I went to do the IB in London, and then now being here. And Monakiri asked me to reflect briefly upon my Yale experience and what it means to be a Kenyan here at Yale. So there's three things that stood out for me, and if you'll allow me, I'll talk you a bit through them. The first is actually a very big picture, and just the international experiences that coming to Yale has allowed me to have, and really see that the world is not so different from Kenya. So my freshman year, I was in the Philippines, in Manila, with a nonprofit that deals with poverty alleviation. And the whole idea of the organization I was working with is that you can't alleviate people from poverty unless people have a sense of self-worth and that they trust their neighbors. So the model of this nonprofit was that you build your neighbor's house, and you're going to build the best house you possibly can because your neighbors also built your house. But it was very nice to land in the Philippines and get into these things they call jeepneys. Now, jeepneys are matatus, but only in Manila. So everyone in my group was like really shocked that they were climbing the curb, they were jumping traffic lights, and I felt so much at home. I was like, yes, like this is just like Nairobi. My junior year, so my third year, I was in Spain with one of my best friends, and we're in this basilica, and there's all these geese and crazy birds running around. And all of a sudden, I hear these women speaking Kikamba. Now, my mother is from Kitui. So I woke up to them and I tell them, you know, my mother's from Kitui, and we ended up having a 2-hour-long conversation because there was a group of nuns who'd lived in Barcelona for 30 years, and I happened to come across them. The last thing actually happened very recently. I was in Syria over spring break, and all these activities have been funded by Yale. I should just add that in. I'm a very broke student. But I don't speak a word of Arabic. However, I was able to bargain for my scarves and my earrings with Swahili because I would say I'm not paying more than Mia Hamsin for a scarf. And they understand Mia, they understand Hamsini, they understand Elf. It was wonderful. The second thing Yale has really allowed me to do is connect with home. On an academic level, I'm actually writing my senior thesis on electoral conflict and why 2007 was the most explosive violence in our electoral history. And I've connected with home on 2 ways. I was actually with Frank, who's here in the audience. In the 2007 election, we went as election monitors. We were actually at Olympic Primary when Raila came to try and vote. He happened to bring Fred Guma with him. I'm still unclear as to why that happened. But his name was not found on the voters' register. I never thought I'd been that close to death, but it was a wonderful experience to be able to be home at that time. In terms of connecting with other academics in the area or other Kenyans, Wangari Maathai was recently here. It was a wonderful opportunity to be with her and hear her speak. Kalestros Juma is a professor up at Harvard, the Kennedy School. He comes here quite often with the forestry school. And even Ali Mazrui, who teaches up at Binghamton, but I've been able to speak with him as I'm writing my essay. And the final thing, I guess, connecting with home, on a more trivial level, I really wish I still had my Nairobi accent. My sister and brother make fun of me all the time, which is really sad because I speak to them fairly often. But I was at a social gathering the other day with law school students, and I hear this man who has a Nairobi accent. So I go up to him, I know nothing about him, and we ended up speaking for a while about Macmende, who's the black Chuck Norris, and also some other trivial things like that. The final thing that Yale's really given me an opportunity to do is share a bit about Kenya with the student community. And there's three ways I've really been able to do this. The first is actually through Model UN, which is an activity I've done for over 10 years. I did it in Nairobi. The conference every year is held in Gigiri at the headquarters of the UN. And this year I actually run a committee of the Waki Commission. Justice Waki happens to be married to my mother's older sister. So it was really nice to be able to run this committee and give students across the US an opportunity to really think about the issues of post-election violence and really understand how hard it is to deal with an issue like that, especially for a country like Kenya that's in a region where there's war in Sudan, there's war in Somalia, and Kenya's really, for such a long time, been a bastion of peace. So it was really personal and special for me to share that. And then on the level of faculty, one of my favorite classes at Yale was a class on education in Africa, taught with Kanadawa. Not only was it great to be able to share my experiences, I went to literature convent in Sangari, and then I went to Brook House, and I've had cousins who've gone to Mangu. But Kanadawa actually wrote her thesis on Alliance Boys and how Alliance Boys run Kenya, so that was really fun to be in class with her. So I guess to close, the one thing my father, Okioko Mbaka, told me was the only guarantee my parents would ever give me in life was a good education. Other than that, I was on my own. And that's really what Yale has allowed me to get. I always tell my friends, if Yale was in Nairobi, I'd have no reason to leave. But I can't wait for Yale to move to Nairobi. So what I can do is get this education and go back home and be part of making Kenya what I want it to be. So I'm really blessed and privileged to have had this opportunity. And I'm really glad and excited for going back home finally and living my life out there.
Chris Omalwa, K24, in Delaware, USA.